Hi, I'm Jerry Gordon, Senior Editor for the New Inks Review, and we're continuing our monthly dialogues with Nidra Poller in Paris. Nidra is a well-published author, columnist, journalist, investigator, and she's currently keeping a watching brief, as the British would call it, on the question of what's transpiring with the rather interesting politics in La République, so to speak. So Nidra,
yes,
Eric Zemmour has really caught a wave of attention, particularly after he announced his, quote, Reconquer Party for the presidential run.
yes, typical, yes.
And what's been the reaction?
So first of all, this is typical Zemmour. Reconquer. Reconquer is the Reconquista, when the Spanish kicked out the Muslims, right? Took back Spain.
Yes, correct.
They kicked out the Muslims, like, oh, and they kicked out the Jews. And that's one of the reasons why there are lots of Jews in North Africa. So these references are always halfway out of focus. So what has happened, he had calculated, as small, as much as you can see from looking from the outside, he calculated that he was going to announce his candidature and take away the fire from les Républicains, which I call the parliamentary right. I think sometimes in English you say the legacy right, or we could even say the normal right, the real right wing or conservative party. He thought he would take the fire away from them because he's been saying that they're nobody, nowhere. And of course, he believes what he says. As it turns out, their choice of candidate looks like it's very good. And in fact, it's the Républicains that have taken the fire away from Zemmour. When Zemmour announced his candidature with a video, we didn't talk about that video yet, did we?
No, we did not.
Well, some people said it was, very original and very modern. I think it was totally ridiculous. It starts out, he puts himself in the setting of de Gaulle, and he has a microphone from the 40s, and he's looking down at some papers, and he has leather-bound books on a bookshelf behind him, and he starts his talk, and then he shows film clips of bad things that are happening in France. To me, it was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, pretentious, and off, how to say, I can't think of the word. Again, it's just slightly out of focus, okay? Then he had an interview on TV, prime time, and he wasn't happy with it. So afterwards, he gave a little impromptu press conference in the hallway and said that the journalist was a connard, like a bastard, and he criticized it. So again, he can say anything he wants about anyone else. When he was doing journalism, he treated people any way he wanted, but he thinks that somehow they should be fair to him, but they weren't, they aren't. And that's an old story, and he could have anticipated it. I think that fair-minded people say that the interview was not well done by the journalist, but he could have handled it in a different way, Zemmour. Then he had his rally. And the rally, he spoke for, I think, an hour and 20 minutes. He had about 10,000 people, fans, totally fans. So again, people were a bit impressed. He was better on stage than they had expected. And he kept his audience enthralled from beginning to end. And I thought the rally was like Facebook. You know, you put out a few lines and then they give you the likes, and then you say something bad about somebody and they give you the raspberries. Is that what it's called in English? You know, and very predictable, very ill-mannered, or shocking many times, very dismissive of everyone but himself. He has no backing yet from any significant political figure. So he was all alone at the rally. And he spoke about the president in the most shocking way. I think that you would experience the same thing as an American. You can be against a president, though I must say the discourse in America today is a bit unhinged. So, but here it was over the top, because first of all, he said, oh, it's not Macron, he doesn't matter, he doesn't interest me. And then it was an ad hominem attack, disgusting. Very much the way Trump did in the primaries, in the Republican primaries, a very disgusting way of attacking a human being. After that, who rose in the polls? Not Zemmour, it's Valérie Pécresse, the candidate for the Republicains, and she shot up in the polls, and for the first time, they predicted that she could win against Macron. So that's the stage where we are now.
Okay. There's been commentary out of France criticizing Zemmour. One of the more intriguing ones to me was by somebody I've interviewed a couple of times, and that's Mr. Garfinkel. And he had a piece in the New York Sun, which kind of indicated that there was an element amongst French Jews that had turned conservative that would vote for him.
Oh, French Jews and the majority are conservative.
Right.
It's not like the United States. They do not vote left, they vote right.
Right.
He has a very small following among French Jews. He has done and said too many things that are unacceptable to French Jews. French Jews are known to be the most Zionist of all the Jews in the diaspora. And though Zemmour said something good, straight, right? He was shocked by the French vote at the UN for this latest resolution, sort of handing over the Temple Mount to the Islam. And I think that from my point of view as a Zionist, the most hopeful thing would be if Valérie Pécresse could win over Macron, because I think that you will get a change in the State Department, foreign affairs, and that the French would stop doing this at the UN. That one small hope that I can nourish. And so far, I haven't seen any evidence of Zemmour picking up steam. He has now support from one person, Philippe de Villiers, who's a minor figure, a sort of loser, has been appealing to sovereignists. But, it's not enough to talk in slogans and to promise to do things that are impossible. He gave his program at the rally, and again, it's out of focus. It's an overreaction to the point that I find myself starting to defend immigration and ethnic cultures and diversity and multiculturalism. He's so much hammering away at it without any kind of discernment and precision. So one of the things that struck me in his plan to, really clamp down on immigration is if an immigrant is unemployed for more than 6 months, he would have to go be deported back to his country. So, you could, what does that mean? You could be an immigrant that's been working for 30 years here in some very high level, high tech company. And then there's a change and you're out of work for a while and then you go back. It's filled with unthinkable things like that. And it arouses, it arouses the kind of hatred that always turns against us and that is useful to no one. It's a delicate subject. Nobody knows really how to handle it. You can't handle it by saying, well, I wish it never happened. I wish we never had a mass Muslim immigration, or I wish that all the Muslims that came to France turned into good citizens in the first generation and forever after. But it didn't happen that way, and we have to deal with it. And if you stir up hatred and anger and violence, you can control it, and it doesn't give you the practical results that you're promising. And then the Republicains are not in any way far behind Zemmour in trying to deal with this problem. Security, the problem of immigration in a welfare society, not welfare, I'm sorry, I'm losing my words here. We have a big social net in France. So it's not the same way as immigrants that come to the United States, that sneak in, go right to work, doing things that are essential, and whatever the parties say, they can't really get rid of this input. Because we have a society that has a too large a safety net, we can't have a massive immigration of dependent people that aren't able to rise to any kind of decent professional level in France, and also with big families that have to then be subsidized. So these are things that have to be dealt with. I think that Valérie Pécresse was a good choice because she's soft-spoken and clear-minded, and she's had a very good success as president of the region, Île-de-France. She's not a great speaker, and when she tries to sort of, stoke up the crowd, it's a little bit off key, but that's not important. She has a whole party behind her, and Zemmour doesn't have a party. Right now he's in Armenia and showing his concern for the Armenian genocide. Perfectly normal thing to do. But as far as I can tell you today, he's lost his touch. And again, at his rally, he told the people to boo the journalists. Well, he was a journalist until a few months ago. And it's the journalists that really helped him to move up. What he was doing at the beginning was having a book party, big sort of small rallies of people that had read his book and came to get autographs. And so they were covered as if they were important events. And that, that stoked up interest in him and pushed him up very far. That was the journalists that did that. They even asked themselves, is this artificial? Are we making him important? They decided no, that he was an important figure. But as I said, either last time or the time before that, once there's a candidate for Les Républicains, the whole picture changes. Now he has to compete with them. Until then, he could just say they're nobody, they're nothing. It's not true. That's where it stands.
So where is Zemmour getting his money from?
I think something you suggested in an email. Or maybe you know? I don't know. Do you know?
No, there's been suspicions that he was getting out of certain people in the city of London, but I kind of doubt that.
From people where?
In the city of London, from the financial.
No, that was another flop. Oh no, he went to London and the mayor said, we don't want him here. And the place he had booked that was very posh turned him down. And so he was kind of on the fringes of London and probably a little cold, very bare bones room. And again, in France, he'll talk about immigration, immigrants, assimilation. And then he'll go to London and speak to the French people there, as French people in London doesn't expect them to give up their Frenchness. No, that wasn't, I don't think so, but I don't know. That's the kind of information I never have. Everything to do with money seems to escape me, Joe.
So there are 3 women now running.
Yeah, let's see. I
Party
think
in
even more.
France.
There's there's Valérie Pécresse, Marine Le Pen, Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, and there's one more, I think, woman for a very small party, but or maybe two other, the kind of party that's polled to get about 1% of the vote. So,
But it's interesting to me, quite frankly, that the gal who's head of the center-right party, which I think you've said in our previous conversations, really controls the National Assembly, doesn't it? Or has?
No, Macron got they controlled the Senate. Macron got a majority in the Assemblée. The Assemblée is not, and the Senate, they're not as important here as in the United States. They have much less autonomy to kind of vote along party lines, and they don't have anything like the power of Congress. But no, what I say is the Republicans, they have the majority and the lower levels of government. We have so many things, the region and the département and the commune and the city and the municipality. And so on those levels, they're very, very strong, and they're stronger than Macron. And you know what Zemmour said about Valérie Pécresse? He said, she's a Macron in skirts. So it's a very old-fashioned way to dismiss a woman. It's very old-fashioned to dismiss a woman who's a political leader while he has ever been any political, he's never been elected to any office whatsoever. He has no political experience. She's running the most important region in the whole country, and she has a good track record. Fair-minded people from all sides are saying that. And she is not she's not Macron, she's different. Very different. So he wants to dismiss her. So the two things he dismisses her is saying that she's the same as Macron, in other words, not a real conservative, and in skirts, where the political women are always in pantalon these days. But that's very dismissive. And there are a lot of female journalists, there are a lot of female politicians, a lot of female voters, and they don't like that.
Having said that, is the French polity afflicted with something that has occurred in the past, a sense of malaise about how things are going, notwithstanding the fact that France has been pretty successful about the handling of the pandemic, and frankly, its economic numbers look pretty robust, surpassing that of even pre-pandemic levels.
Yeah.
Why are they all in this sense of a dog in the manger responsibility?
There's several factors. French people complain, they love to complain. They expect the government to do everything, and then they complain about everything the government does. And when the government tries to handle the pandemic by saying that they should wear a mask or get vaccinated or this or that, a certain sector, not the whole population, reacts by saying, who do they think they are, pushing us around and treating us like children. The French, in many ways, like Americans, like most of the countries I know, they tend to look at things just from the point of view of their own country, and they are ignorant of, for instance, of what's happening in the United States. Every time I talk about the mortality level from COVID in the United States compared to France, the first reaction, sort of practically snapping back at me, is, oh yes, but they have a bigger population. Well, of course, I researched that early on. And you multiply it. I don't know what your death rate is today, but a short while ago, I saw it was like 1,000 a day. And we go from, right? And we go from 50 to 100 a day. And the United States is just short of 5 times our population. So quickly, right? If you took 5 times 100, it's only 500, not 1,000. There's a big gap. No, we've done very well, but I guess most people think that we haven't. On the other hand, we're one of the most vaccinated countries. And I was in a shop, and an optician, there was a British woman there, and she didn't have a mask on, and she was talking away. I was really surprised because in Paris, nobody goes into a shop without a mask. Nobody. So people have gone along at every step. When we had lockdown, the people stayed home. Now they closed the discotheque, the nightclubs, because that's where too much was spreading. So as often, it's not so realistic, the feeling of things going badly. On the other hand, as I've often said, the crime situation is very important to French people because we're not living a life where in gated communities where you go everywhere in your car with the doors locked and you slip through neighborhoods that would scare us out of our wits. And then you say, oh, in France, you have no-go zones. No, this is one of the reasons that Zemmour has an audience, and that all of the candidates, except some very few left-wing who won't get anywhere near the second round, they are trying to address this problem. And it is something that dampens the morale of French people because they're very shocked. When I first came here to live in 1972, there was just virtually no street violence. You could go anywhere all the time. So that is a factor. And the other factor, I think, is that people have different ways of reacting to their panic about the pandemic. And so one of the ways is to not recognize that it's been handled pretty well. There's a lot of criticism, but it's not so well founded. And yes, it's been handled quite well here, quite well. Not like Israel, but quite well.
Nidra, which brings me back to a topic we've dealt with previously, but it just seems to be getting worse. Those were attacks by immigrants and others against Jews, particularly in mixed housing areas, the banlieues, as you would call them. And
the banlieue, the Jews have essentially left the banlieue. Now it's the peripheral, it's the outer arrondissement of the city, and then in all the cities, it's there's been a little upsurge. In fact, in the last few years, attacks have been concentrated on police, firemen, medical personnel, everything that represents the state. There are a lot of attacks on Christians. Attacks on Jews had gone down to quite a bit lower level, and now there's an upsurge. And there's the resolved case of Sarah Halimi. That's an interesting example, tragic example of mixed neighborhood, because when politicians try to get their minds around the problem that's called immigration, I would call it 21st century jihad, population jihad, stealth jihad. There's a lot of stumbling around the concepts. And so they say, well, we have to break up the ghettos. These are not imposed from the outside. In fact, it's people that are choosing to live among themselves. That's the first step. The second step is, well, there's a higher percentage of Muslim new immigrants in public housing. Second step is they have too many people that behave badly, and so anybody who can leave, leaves. And the third step is the Qaid start to take over those neighborhoods and run them with the drug dealers, and they become absolutely unlivable. But this, when they talk about, well, we have to break this up, and spread this population around, you say, oh yeah, so that means that they could come next door to me? Is that going to solve the problem? And that's the thing about Sarah Halimi was murdered. If she had more money, she would have moved out of that place. When she moved in, most of the tenants were Jews. And of course, when the Jews came from North Africa, and also there was a big influx of Muslims from North Africa, they lived in the same neighborhoods and they used to get along. Even up to about 2000, they were getting along. But little by little, the Islamists have worked those populations over and turned them into this hostile element. So there will have to be, every candidate who has any chance of getting elected has a sort of, tough on crime, the issues, tough on crime, find some way to civilize the uncivilized sectors of the population, usually fourth generation immigrants from Muslim countries, get Europe to take care of its borders, and then they want to reform Schengen, where, we have free circulation between European countries and the EU, and it just can't work. So they're going to also have some kind of border controls also. This is the kind of program that's going to win this election.
Nidra, was there anything further out of those continuing parliamentary investigations into the murder of Sarah Halimi?
It's heartbreaking. Somehow everybody all along the line turned into a coward, blind, paralyzed. I saw the testimony of sort of ordinary policeman, happened to be Black. That's not a reason, but it happens. And he was there, one of the first one there, and he testified. But he didn't hear the screams of this woman being beaten. There's an account of, the autopsy. I can't repeat the things. To beat a human being that way. The judge, as I told you, the investigating judge, is just totally hostile to anything coming from the Jewish community or from anyone concerned about the murderer being put on trial. So hostile that she should have been dismissed, and that can be done even with an independent judicial system. But then everyone along the way, including the Jewish community leaders. It's like what happened with Sebastian Salam, which was the first that we know of a really Islamic murder. And we had the same thing. There were rumors going around, no, he was on drugs or he was dealing, or no, don't say it's anti-Semitic. And in this case, of course, it was so obvious it was anti-Semitic. So they fell back on this thing. well, the police didn't know what was going on, or they thought he might be an armed terrorist. So they leave this woman in his hands, and they're there with their guns, and they don't try to do anything. It's unreal. And what will come of it? Well, at least this report is extremely thorough, carefully done. It's not a propaganda thing. It's not activists making up information to get into the news. It's carefully talking to one person after the other. And none of them can explain why they did nothing and why they did what they did.
There's a new government in Germany comprised of led by socialist Olaf Scholz with Green and Free Republican coalition members. But what does that mean about Macron's leadership? Is that a legacy from the 16 years of association with the former Chancellor Merkel?
Well, probably the tandem of Germany and France in the heart of the European Union will continue to have its force for a whole wide variety of reasons, and including the fact that the UK is no longer with us. The kind of a good relationship and very good friendship and understanding. Well, we'll see what happens when our elections are over, whether it's Macron or Pécresse or someone else that's elected, how that relationship will go. Whether the European Union has to shake up, they have to change the balance of power in the Union. There has to be something stronger on the level of defense, whether it's military or not exactly military, but something has to move there. Of course, Macron is going to be the president of the European Union. You know, it's rotating right now during the campaign. So he'll use that to, at the same time, show himself off a lot and show how important he is and how important France is, and then to try to show that he could get what he wants from the Union. Many people feel that the UK would not have left the Union if the Union had not been so stubborn in refusing what the UK was asking for. All the countries now in Europe want a greater degree of sovereignty.
What is Macron's position with these faltering Iran JCOP discussions that Biden has been pushing and Israel has been resisting?
I beg to disagree with you. I don't think Biden has been pushing them. I think he made not a bet, but he set himself the challenge to see if Iran could be reined in by reintegrating the JCPOA. And I have followed it every step of the way. All of the statements by the United States government have been firm and uncompromising. They have said no sanction relief until Iran goes back into compliance with the original terms. All along, they've been saying time is running out. Iran is making too many changes. Their program is going too far. It won't make any more sense. The JCPOA doesn't make any more sense. And so I don't think that he's pushing it. I think that they said they're going to try it, and now they're about to give up. Well, they tried it all along, but they didn't make concessions. I've summarized for my weekly review of the English language media for Elnet. I've summarized articles saying, that's it, we're sure they're going to give in, they're going to make compromises. Tomorrow you'll see they'll sell the house. The furniture, they haven't done it. They haven't done it. And the Europeans are not in the same position they were in 2015 when they negotiated. Not at all. They aren't satisfied. And they are pushing and they're looking to see what the United States will do, what Israel will do. They feel threatened by Iran. They feel threatened by jihad throughout the world, and it's all around us. We're not far away like the United States. Everything that happens is just next door to us. And I don't see hardly any enthusiasm. I would say zero enthusiasm for the JCPOA in France today. The only ones that ever say anything good about it are the Russians. After every meeting, they say, oh, I think it was very constructive. And then you get the real story, and it's less and less constructive. I don't even know if they're meeting this week. Last week, they had 2 meetings, and the second meeting ended after 1 hour. So it's not the situation it was when the JCPOA was signed. No. You know, deep in their hearts, world leaders in democracies all over the world must be saying that they hope that somehow Israel, with America's help, will smash Iran and get this problem out of our hair.
Speaking about that, there was a poll recently taken in Israel, and I'm trying to juxtapose this. Israel is amongst the top happiest countries in the world.
Yes, yes, yes.
And yet, in this recent poll, they voted something like 62% approving an attack on Iran.
Yes.
What's the logic behind that?
Well, for one thing, they have a wonderful culture, so that makes people happy. Being surrounded by all that intelligence and all that, individually, Israelis have so much vitality, so collectively, it makes for a very happy place. It's because they're so much in touch with reality that it keeps your mind clear, right? They know that their survival depends on their lucidity and their strength, and they have enough experience to see that they're capable of doing it. That's really exhilarating in the world today, when so many people who are further away from the danger, or think they are, feel either, oh, I can't talk about it, or I can't think about it, and what are we going to do? And they know what they'll do. They'll do what they've done every time, and they'll just step up and do what has to be done. I feel very happy when I go there. It's a long time now because of the pandemic, but I think that it's kind of it's a culture that's bringing out the best in people. Oh, there are lots of complaints, after all, people complain, but yes, they're happy. They're happy, and then there's a bit of a, sort of the same as you have people have different personalities, and some people are happy and some people complain all the time and gripe and drag their heels. And the French enjoy life. They enjoy life, and they have a wonderful lifestyle and a sense of how to enjoy life. But they can still, if you ask them, they might say that the country is going to the dogs. No, not to the dogs. They love dogs. Going to the fish, whatever. I think, what do you think about why Israelis?
Well, basically, it's interesting to me. On the one hand, the United States is being implacable to a degree with negotiations with the Iranians, but they seem to have inherited some of the activities of Mr. Obama regarding the supply of certain critical weapons, essentially, to Israel. And I'll be specific about it. Today, there was an announcement on Reuters that the US was not going to deploy the promised refueling planes that conceivably Israel would need if it was going to be making a conventional attack. And I hearken back to something that I interviewed in 2012 to Ronan Bergman. At the time, there was, ironically, a defense minister by the name of Ehud Barak, who's been vilified subsequently during the Netanyahu regime. And at that point in time, the Israelis had requested this very sophisticated US aircraft. It's called the VS-22. It's the Osprey, which the Marines use. It is by far the most mission critical aircraft to send in the Sayarets to do reconnaissance before an attack. And yet Obama said no deliveries. And now we have Biden saying no refueling planes that we promised you are to be delivered as of the moment. So it's kind of a mixed situation as regards the relationship with the US. It has been made abundantly clear last week in Washington by the defense minister, Gantz, that Israel was prepared to undertake this mission that we've just discussed alone, if need be. That is where things perhaps could shake out.
Israelis told me years ago that when Obama was president and sort of insulting Israel 1 week out of 2,
yeah,
they had very good cooperation as far as the weapons provision was concerned. I've followed this closely, as I said, for my review, because I think it's a critical issue. I think it's so obviously a critical issue. And so I'll go through the press, right? And I'll come and think, things aren't going so well between Israel and the United States. Well, and then I read it. And then I keep going. And I find out that that's not the truth. Now, I don't know what the ultimate outcome of this will be. And I don't know if other people can predict it better than me. What I observe is that the Biden administration is consulting more with Israel than with anyone else, any other country, about the Iran problem. Whereas you would think it would be the Europeans, because the Europeans were in the JCPOA with them, but it's not. The Israelis are back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They have the task force, the joint, the discussions and everything. Last week, Bennett called Blinken and said, stop these talks in Vienna. Iran is just fooling around, and they're developing their weapon, and they're not giving an inch at the talk. That's the next day. The talks ended after 1 hour. They're doing joint military exercises,
right,
simulating an attack on Iran. This is nothing like the atmosphere that we knew under Obama or anybody else. No, we never saw this. I won't go into detail, but Trump, that some people think is the best friend Israel ever had, his policy was no war whatsoever. Pull out of every place and don't go into any place and just make deals. We'll make a deal. And now it turns out, and we find out that he thought that the peace process, two-state solution, that if Israel had only been reasonable, he would have made that deal too. Bolton said he had no coherent vision of any aspect of foreign policy. Everything was like a New York City real estate deal. He'd look around, oh, they want this one has that, I'll give them this, let's do it. And nobody knows where those things go in the long term. Even though good things came of it, I don't deny that. Okay, so go back to it. Then this is the first time I've seen this level of upfront public indication that there could be cooperation on a military effort. You certainly don't expect the United States to say publicly, yes, Israel's going to attack and we're going to help them. Even to tell the truth about what weapons they're going to give. I guess, people who have inside information, which isn't my case, could tell me that I'm wrong about that. But, and then they give lip service sometimes. Oh, it's not too good idea to be attacking this way and that way here and there. But if the United States wanted to put pressure on Israel to say, don't keep bombing Syria, southern Lebanon, don't keep sabotaging Iranian systems, they could put pressure. We would know about it. They haven't been putting pressure. So it's only a bet I can make. But I don't think that that they're going to go in much further in this attempt to make a deal on Iran's nuclear program. It was quite a shock, maybe not to us, but it was a shock maybe to the people involved, when the new team came to Vienna and they said, okay, everything that was agreed up to now, which was hardly anything, is back up for discussion. So if they want to be played for fools like they did under Obama, I think we would see it and they would have done it.
I'd like to
Yeah.
close this discussion with something that has been underreported in the US press. It is something that, from my vantage point and that of a colleague who's part of the resistance in the Sudan, has emerged over the past 2 years, and we were very prescient in reporting on it. And that is essentially the problem in the entire region south of the Sahara, commonly known as the Sahel, running from the Red Sea all the way over to the Gulf of Guinea. It is now afflicted with a jihadist war against many of the ill-equipped governments. The only counterterrorism force there of any consequence are the 5,000 French. There's another contingent of about 1,000 Brits and another 1,000 special forces. The problem has been that they have been unable to do anything tractable because the local political regimes, especially in Mali, especially in Niger, and now in Burkina Faso, and heading over towards Equatorial Africa, are not capable politically of doing anything. There have been coups upon coups. We had coups in Sudan, obviously, which upset the Abraham Accord. And now there have been coups essentially in Mali yet again. And who should be invited in but Mr. Putin's Foreign Legion, otherwise known as the Wagner Group. They are now controlling security in Khartoum, Central African Republic. They've been invited into Mali. God knows essentially where else they're going. This is an issue that confronts Mr. Macron and, to a degree, the EU, as well as the US. Why do we say this? Because lurking behind it is a geopolitical great game of the 21st century. You've got China with military ports in Djibouti. You now have China building another military port in the Gulf of Guinea. And you've got Russia essentially trying to wheedle its way in on the cheap with the little green men of the Wagner Group. So how does that reflect back on Macron's foreign policy?
He was an exception in coming forward to start that mission in Mali.
Right.
That was, the French, remember how the French were in 2003, how dare the Americans invade Iraq? That's not the way how you deal with things. We believe in diplomacy, the UN, treating all countries with respect. And Macron saw that if they didn't stop the jihadis in Mali, they would take over the Maghreb, which is like we're sitting on the beach and our feet are in the water of that. So they tried to handle it. They tried to get other European countries to come into it. The other European countries, most of them have no military to speak of. They don't want to create one. They don't want to give money. And they don't want to be involved in the fighting, and they don't want to even hear about it. So the French went in and they thought they could, treat it and localize it. Like if you localize an infection and get rid of it before it can spread all over your body. And it was very low key as far as a domestic news is concerned. They hardly ever spoke about it. Once in a while, they would say that a serviceman was killed, but you didn't feel that the French people were waiting every day to see what happened in Mali. And then they start to say, wait a minute, in Mali, if they're going to vote for an Islamic government, we can't continue this. So now they're in a situation where they can't pull out completely. And they can't go on with it the way they were doing because, it's like when, after the Americans got rid of Saddam Hussein, wasn't it shortly after the Iraqis made a constitution and it's going to be based on Sharia law, and they started persecuting the Christians? And you say, how can you, what position can you take with these countries? And it just keeps growing. The source of this mass immigration is from these failed states. Sometimes you hear in the debate, oh, well, we want to stop this mass immigration. So of course we have to protect our frontier, but we have to help these countries to develop so that people won't want to leave. From your contacts, I know from my contacts, the good people leave those countries because they're tyrannical, they're kleptocratic states. They don't let people be free to express themselves. Their so-called elections are phony, and so you can deal with that. How can you deal with that? Foreign aid, as you know, it goes into the pockets of the kleptocrats. So that's the situation we're in. When people thought only the Jews were being attacked by Muslim immigrants, they thought it was the fault of the Jews. Now they see that everybody is exposed. When they thought Israel was the only target internationally of the Muslims, they thought it was the fault of Israel wasn't treating the Palestinians right. And now we're all facing that. We're all facing that. It's a typical huge geopolitical problem that boils along and simmers for decades, and then you realize it's just overwhelming. I don't know where the leadership will come from in the democracies to deal with it. And of course, people in Europe who used to complain about the United States, who do they think they are, the world's policemen? Now they're complaining that the United States has pulled out. I can help you describe the situation for the beginning of a solution. Well, maybe next month, next month's discussion, maybe we could do it.
On that note, I want to thank you for another brilliant discussion and assessment. And we hope to do this frequently as the April elections approach in the new year. Thank you again.
Count on me.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.